Here's the story of one little boy who lived with his folks in a land without joy, where fog and pollution was all people saw, for every art was forbidden by law. One afternoon in the city streets, a bunch of kids our hero meets. They jumped around without a clue, watching dust dancing round their shoes. "Now watch," Dennis said with a chalk in his hand, and began to draw so they'd understand. And so he filled the concrete wall with fine ornaments, making no sense at all. He turned around to show what he'd drawn, to discover the kids had already gone. Our little hero had a shock as a speeding car came around the block. "Oh my God, I've been ratted out," the boy thought as he heard a shout. "It's time for you to stop that junk." And then he was thrown into the trunk. They drove for hours and hours again, and our little friend was crying in vain. Our little hero, feeling ill, was led to a giant manor on a hill. A spooky house it was for sure, with loads of creepy aperture. In front of him there stood aloof a death ray cannon on the roof. In a peculiar room at the top of a stair, they left him alone, chained to a chair. The little boy had yet a surprise by a half-bald man with stinging eyes. With a twist of doom and a hunchback assistant, he appeared in the room in the wave of an instant. "You must be Dennis, I've heard of you, and I've seen those horrible things that you do. I am Dr. Nordahl, have you heard of me? I'm here to end your misery." From a wooden tray with splinters and dents, filled up with knives and strange instruments, he picked up a syringe the size of his arm and ensured little Dennis it doing no harm. But Dennis screamed and shut his eyes as Dr. Nordahl stung him twice. Dennis sat there tied down with chains as the gruesome liquids pumped through his veins. And after a while, as he'd hung in tough, Dr. Nordahl said, "I don't think you've had quite enough." So Nordahl then revealed from his pocket a box with a little pill in a socket. "Relax," he said, "it's just a pill, a little treat that will make you ill." So he forced the pill down Dennis' throat and held in his nose until he swallowed. "Had a pelt," he then yelled in a horrible voice, "introduced little Dennis to the other boys." His hunchback assistant came humping back, and then Dennis' vision faded to black. Had a pills then took Dennis across the floor and dragged him down deep through the darkest corridor. "What place is this of madness and gloom?" Dennis thought as he was tossed in a room. He was still weakened, his eyes still blurred, and soon his head began to hurt. But as he gained his better sight, his heart was soon filled with delight. For he could see across the room, across the madness, past the gloom, 2 other boys were captured here, gathered round a lifeless sphere. A giant stone fell from his heart. Now here's something for a start. A sudden pop into my mind that I am not the only kind. He thought, "We're gonna end this doom," and stumbled slow across the room, but learned as he came close to hand a fact he did not understand. The kids who should be on his side were staring at him, terrified.
"Go in and cut out the sickness and return to innocence."
The little boys were Bo and Bob, and they too were part of Nordahl's crop, and they had tried to dodge his realm, but every time they'd been overwhelmed. "Let's take him down before he blows," said little Bo and wiped his nose. "He must regret he came in here to ruin our precious little sphere." "No, please," he said to Bob and Bo, "I'm just like you, I'm not your foe. Now there's no need to scream and shout, just tell me, do you know the way out?" Bob and Bo just shook their heads, and then he started to regret that he had done his thoughtless deeds out there in the open streets. Dennis sat down in frustrated despair and pulled out some crayons he'd hid in his hair. He drew and he drew on the concrete floor, and things turned out better than ever before. He remembered the pain from the things he'd been through and let out his anger, frustration, and blue in one last effort by one little man to save all the world with a crayon in hand. "What magic is this?" Bo and Bob shouted, and it was like they had never doubted that Dennis, their little newfound friend, would lead their prisonry to an end. Dennis was as shocked as Bob and Bo as they all watched his fear begin to glow. A subtle hum and a flash of light, and they found themselves in a land of white. When the lights dimmed, they all felt blessed. It seemed their escape had been a success. "Alas, oh no, now what is this?" yelled Bob and Bo and little Dennis. They stood dumbfounded as they grew aware that Dr. Nordahl was suddenly there. "Congratulations, you found the key that only your talents could set you free. Though all of your trials seemed mean and unfair, there was a point to it all, you must be aware. Learning the ropes is a tedious thing, but knowledge and joy is what it will bring."